Once upon a time, long, long ago, when the world was still young and magic sparkled in every dewdrop, there lived a goddess more beautiful than all the stars combined. Her name was Selene, and she had the most important job in the entire universe. She drove the moon across the night sky every single evening. But tonight, dear little dreamer, something was terribly wrong. Picture this. Selene sat in her magnificent silver chariot, pulled by two winged horses, as white as fresh snow, and as gentle as whispered lullabies. Their names were Lampos and Phaethon, and their hooves made the softest clip-clop sound as they galloped through the velvety darkness above the clouds. Usually this sound was as comforting as your mother's heartbeat, but tonight it felt different. The moon, Selene's precious glowing moon, had stopped whispering. Now you might wonder, do moons really whisper? Oh yes, sweet child, they do. Every night, as Selene guided her lunar chariot across the star-dotted sky, the moon would whisper the most beautiful secrets. It whispered about the dreams of sleeping children, the wishes of lonely hearts, and the gentle songs that flowers sing when no one is listening. These whispers were like invisible threads of silver light that connected every sleeping person on Earth, weaving dreams together like the most wonderful blanket you could ever imagine. But for 3 whole nights now, can you count that on your fingers? 1, 2, 3. The moon had been completely, utterly, mysteriously silent. Selene's usually calm and peaceful face was creased with worry lines, like ripples on a quiet pond when a pebble drops in. Her long silvery hair that usually flowed behind her like liquid moonlight now hung limply around her shoulders. Even her beautiful gown, woven from starlight and midnight breezes, seemed to have lost its sparkle. "What's wrong, my dear moon?" she whispered softly, reaching out to touch its glowing surface with her gentle hand. But the moon remained as quiet as a sleeping mouse. Down on Earth, something terrible was happening. Without the moon's whispers, children were having trouble falling asleep. They tossed and turned in their beds like little boats on a choppy sea. Some stared at their ceilings with wide, worried eyes. Others clutched their favorite stuffed animals and wondered why their dreams felt so far away. The flowers forgot their nighttime songs. The crickets' lullabies sounded lonely and sad. Even the wise old owls, who usually hooted cheerful good nights to anyone who would listen, sat silently on their branches, ruffling their feathers with confusion. But the worst part, oh, the very worst part, was that all the beautiful dreams that should have been floating from house to house, from child to child, were stuck somewhere in the sky, like confused butterflies who had lost their way home. The goddess of night's secret. Mission. Selene knew she had to do something. After all, she wasn't just any ordinary goddess. She was Selene, the protector of peaceful sleep and the guardian of gentle dreams. Her brother Helios drove the sun across the day sky, bringing warmth and light for playing and laughing. But Selene's job was even more special. She brought the cool, calm night that helped everyone rest and dream. As her winged horses carried her through a particularly fluffy cloud that felt like flying through cotton candy, Selene made a decision that would change everything. She would leave her chariot, something she had never, ever done before while on duty, and visit the moon herself to discover what was wrong. Lampos, Phaethon, she called softly to her faithful horses, her voice like the gentle tinkling of silver bells. We must do something very brave tonight. We must help the moon find its voice again. The two winged horses whinnied softly in agreement. Lampos, whose name meant Bright One, had eyes that twinkled like the kindest stars. Phaethon, whose name meant Shining One, had a mane that rippled like silk. In the night breeze, they had been Selene's companions for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they understood that when children couldn't sleep peacefully, it was the most important emergency in all the worlds. Selene guided her chariot closer to the moon than she had ever dared before. Usually, she kept a respectful distance, allowing the moon to float freely while she provided the gentle push needed to move it across the sky. But now, she brought her chariot right up to the moon's glowing surface. What she saw there made her gasp with surprise and sadness. The moon's surface, usually smooth and serene like a calm lake, was covered with what looked like tiny cracks, as if someone had dropped the most precious piece of china, and it had developed hairline fractures all over. But these weren't ordinary cracks. They shimmered with a strange, dark light that seemed to swallow sound itself. "Oh, my dear friend," Selene whispered, stepping carefully from her chariot onto the moon's surface. Her bare feet, as pale and perfect as pearl, made no sound as they touched down. "What has happened to you?" As soon as her feet touched the moon, Selene felt something she had never experienced before, a deep, aching loneliness that seemed to seep up from the moon's very core. It was the kind of loneliness that feels like being the only person awake in the entire world, or like calling out and hearing no echo return. The silence was so complete that Selene could hear her own heartbeat, which usually beat in perfect rhythm with the gentle turning of the night. But now, even her heartbeat seemed too loud in the overwhelming quiet. The discovery of the shadow sprites. As Selene walked carefully across the moon's cracked surface, her gown flowing behind her like liquid silver, she began to notice something else. Tiny moving shadows that scurried and darted between the cracks like mischievous mice. But these weren't ordinary shadows. Oh no, these were shadow sprites, troublesome little creatures no bigger than your thumb, made entirely of darkness and mischief. They looked like tiny, wispy versions of people, but instead of being solid, they were made of the darkest night shadows that hide under beds and in closets. Now, shadow sprites aren't evil, dear sleepy one. They're just confused. You see, shadow sprites feed on silence and darkness, and they had discovered that the moon's whispers were the most delicious thing they had ever tasted. So they had been gobbling up every single whisper, storing them in their tiny shadow bellies like squirrels, storing nuts for winter. The poor little sprites didn't understand that by eating all the moon's whispers, they were preventing children all over the world from having peaceful dreams. They were just hungry, and the whispers tasted like the most wonderful midnight snacks, sweet as honey, cool as morning dew, and sparkling like crushed diamonds. "Hello there, little ones," Selene called softly, her voice as gentle as a mother's lullaby. She knelt down on the moon's surface, making herself smaller and less frightening. "I'm Selene. What are your names?" The shadow sprites stopped their scurrying and turned to look at her, with eyes like tiny black diamonds. They had never seen a goddess up close before, and they were very, very nervous. The largest one, no bigger than a teacup, stepped forward on legs like wisps of smoke. We don't have names, the little sprite whispered in a voice like autumn leaves rustling. We are the forgotten ones. We live in the spaces between things, between day and night, between sleeping and waking, between sound and silence. Selene's heart filled with compassion. She understood now why the sprites had been eating the moon's whispers. They were lonely, just like the moon had become. They were looking for something to fill the empty spaces inside them. Would you like me to give you names? Selene asked gently. Everyone should have a name. Names are like tiny pieces of magic that help us know who we are. The sprites looked at each other with wonder. No one had ever offered them names before. No one had ever noticed them enough to care what they were called. The biggest one among you, Selene said, pointing to the teacup-sized sprite who had spoken. I will call you Whisper, because your voice is soft and precious. The little sprite called Whisper began to glow with a faint, happy light, the first light that had ever shone from within its shadowy form. And you, Selene continued, pointing to a slightly smaller sprite with what looked like the tiny wings, made of moonbeam. I will call you Echo, because you help sounds travel through the night. One by one, Selene gave names to each of the shadow sprites. Dreamwalker, who helped dreams move from one sleeping mind to another. Hush, who knew the secret of perfect silence. Shimmer, whose shadow form sparkled like dark stars. And dozens of others, each name chosen with care and love. As each sprite received its name, something magical happened. They began to understand that they were not just random bits of darkness floating through space. They were important. They had a purpose. They belonged to the night just as much as the stars and the moon and the gentle goddess who had named them. The sprite's confession. Great goddess Selene, Whisper said, his voice stronger now that he had a name to give him confidence. We must tell you something important. We are the reason the moon cannot whisper anymore. The other sprites gathered around Whisper, their tiny shadow forms trembling like leaves in a gentle breeze. They knew they had caused trouble, but they hadn't understood how much trouble until now. We were so hungry, continued Echo, her voice like the soft sigh of wind through grass. We have been drifting through the darkness for so long, looking for something to fill the empty feeling inside us. When we heard the moon's whispers, they were the most beautiful thing we had ever experienced. They tasted like starlight and children's laughter, added Dreamwalker, wrapping his wispy arms around himself. They felt warm inside our cold shadow bodies. We couldn't help ourselves. We ate them all up. Selene listened with patience and understanding. She could see that the sprites were sorry for what they had done, and she could feel their loneliness like a cold wind around her heart. But now, Whisper continued sadly, the whispers are trapped inside us, and we don't know how to let them go. Every time we try to speak, they get all tangled up with our own voices. And the poor moon feels so alone without its whispers that it has forgotten how to make new ones. Selene looked around at the cracked surface of the moon, then at the sad little shadow sprites, then down at the earth far below, where children were struggling to fall asleep. She could see the whole problem now, like a puzzle whose pieces had finally come together. The moon's whispers weren't just sounds, they were connections. They connected the moon to the earth, dreams to dreamers, one sleeping heart to another. Without them, everyone felt alone and disconnected, even the shadow sprites who had eaten them. "Dear little ones," Selene said gently, "I think I know how to help everyone. But first, I need to ask you something very important. Are you willing to help me fix what has gone wrong?" All the sprites nodded eagerly, their shadow forms bobbing like dark flowers in a night breeze. "Good." Selene smiled, and her smile was like the first ray of gentle moonlight after a long, dark night. "Because what we need to do will require all of us working together. We're going to create something that has never existed before. A bridge made of whispers and shadows, connecting every dreaming heart on Earth." The sprites looked at each other with excitement and nervousness. They had never been part of something important before. They had never been needed. "But first," Selene continued, "we need to heal the moon's heart. And to do that, we need to understand why it stopped believing in its own voice." The moon's forgotten memory. Selene walked to the very center of the moon, where the largest crack spread across the surface like a silver river. She placed both her hands on the crack and closed her eyes, letting her goddess senses reach deep into the moon's core. What she felt there made her eyes fill with tears that sparkled like liquid diamonds. The moon was old, older than mountains, older than oceans, older than the first human child who had ever looked up at the night sky and made a wish. For thousands and thousands of years, the moon had whispered to the earth, sharing its gentle light and peaceful energy with everyone below. But slowly, so slowly that no one had noticed, people had begun to forget to listen. They built bright lights that competed with the moon's glow. They filled the night with noise that drowned out its whispers. They looked at screens instead of looking up at the sky. The moon had begun to believe that its whispers didn't matter anymore, that no one needed them, that it was just a cold, lonely rock floating in space, useful only for making tides and lighting paths, but not for touching hearts or inspiring dreams. And when something believes it doesn't matter, it starts to crack from the inside out. "Oh, my dear friend," Selene whispered to the moon, her voice full of love and sadness. "You thought no one was listening, didn't you? You thought your whispers were floating away into empty space, unheard and unwanted." The shadow sprites gathered around Selene, sensing the deep sadness that was rising from the moon's surface like a cold mist. "But that's not true," Selene continued, her voice growing stronger. "Every night, your whispers reach children who are afraid of the dark, and you help them feel safe. Your whispers touch the hearts of people who feel lonely, and you remind them that they are connected to something beautiful and eternal." As Selene spoke, she began to feel something stirring deep within the moon. A tiny flutter, like a butterfly waking up from a long sleep. "Your whispers help flowers dream of spring during winter," she continued. "They help ocean waves remember their rhythm. They help every parent who has ever sung a lullaby find the perfect melody." The flutter grew stronger, and the largest crack in the moon's surface began to glow with a soft, warm light. "And these little shadow sprites," Selene said, gesturing to the creatures gathered around her. "They didn't eat your whispers because they were greedy. They ate them because your whispers were so beautiful, so full of love and magic, that they couldn't resist them. Even in their hunger, they recognized something precious and wonderful. Whisper The largest sprite stepped forward. "Great Moon," he said in his rustling leaves voice, "we kept your whispers safe inside us. We didn't mean to steal them. We were just so hungry for something beautiful in our dark, empty world. And now," Echo added, "we want to give them back. But we don't know how." Selene smiled, and her smile was like sunrise and sunset, and every peaceful twilight all rolled into one. "I know how," she said, "but it will require the most powerful magic of all." "What kind of magic?" asked Dreamwalker, his tiny form shimmering with curiosity. "The magic of working together," Selene replied. "The magic of understanding that we all need each other. The moon needs its whispers. The whispers need someone to carry them. The earth needs the moon's guidance. And the shadow sprites need a purpose that fills their hearts instead of just their bellies. The healing begins." What happened next was the most beautiful thing that had ever occurred in the night sky, dear Sleepy One. Selene asked all the shadow sprites to hold hands, or rather, to hold the wispy edges of each other's forms. Since sprites don't have hands exactly like yours and mine, they formed a circle around the largest crack in the moon's surface, their dark forms creating a ring like a crown made of gentle shadows. Then Selene began to sing. Her voice was like everything peaceful and comforting you have ever heard. Like rain on a roof when you're warm inside. Like your mother humming while she makes your favorite meal. Like the sound of waves at the beach when you're building sandcastles. Like the purr of a contented cat curled up in your lap. As she sang, the most amazing thing began to happen. The whispers that the shadow sprites had swallowed began to glow inside their forms. Like tiny lanterns lighting up from within, the sprites' shadow bodies became translucent, and you could see the whispers swirling around inside them like beautiful, luminous fish swimming in dark water. "Now," Selene sang, "let the whispers remember where they belong. Let them know they are loved and needed, and that their journey is not over. It's just beginning in a new way." One by one, the whispers began to float out of the sprites' forms. But instead of just returning to the moon, something magical happened. Each whisper was now touched with a bit of shadow magic from the sprites who had carried them. This meant that the whispers were stronger than before. They could travel farther, last longer, and carry more love and comfort than ever. The whispers looked like tiny streams of silver light mixed with gentle darkness, creating patterns in the air like the most beautiful calligraphy written by invisible hands. They swirled and danced around the moon's surface, and wherever they touched the cracks began to heal. But the most wonderful part was that the shadow sprites didn't become empty again when the whispers left them. Instead, they discovered that by carrying the whispers with love and care, by becoming part of their journey instead of just consuming them, they had become filled with purpose and belonging. They were no longer the forgotten ones. They were the whisper carriers, the dream weavers, the helpers who would make sure that the moon's gentle voice could reach every corner of the earth, even the darkest places where lonely hearts were waiting for comfort. And as the moon's surface healed completely, as its cracks filled with new silver light, the moon began to whisper again, but now its whispers were richer and more beautiful than ever before, because they carried within them the story of healing, the magic of cooperation, and the joy of discovering that even the smallest, most forgotten creatures have something precious to offer the world. The first new whisper. As the moon's surface glowed with renewed silver light, completely healed and whole once more, something magical began to stir in its very heart. The moon took what felt like its first real breath in days, a deep, contented sigh that rippled across its surface like gentle waves on a peaceful lake. And then, soft as a mother's kiss on a sleepy child's forehead, came the first new whisper. "Thank you," the moon whispered, and its voice was like wind chimes made of starlight, like the softest melody you've ever heard, hummed in your ear when you're almost asleep. "Thank you, dear Selene. Thank you, brave little shadow sprites. I remember now. I remember how much my whispers are needed." The shadow sprites, no, the whisper carriers, as they would be known from this night forward, glowed with happiness. They had never heard anyone say thank you to them before. The words felt warm and golden inside their shadow forms, better than any whisper they had ever tasted. Selene smiled and gently stroked the moon's surface with her hand. "Now, my dear friend, let's make sure your whispers can reach everyone who needs them. But this time, you won't have to do it alone." She turned to the whisper carriers, who were still holding their circle around the healed surface. "Little ones, would you like to learn your new job? Would you like to become the helpers who carry whispers to places even moonlight cannot reach?" Whisper, their leader, stepped forward with eyes shining like the black diamonds. "We would be honored, great goddess. But what if we get hungry again? What if we accidentally eat the whispers we're supposed to deliver?" Selene's laughter was like silver bells ringing in a gentle breeze. "Oh, my dear whisper, you won't be hungry anymore. When you help others, when you have a purpose that matters, your hearts become so full that there's no room for that empty, hungry feeling. You'll see." And she was right. As each whisper carrier accepted their new role, they felt something wonderful happening inside them. The loneliness that had made them so desperately hungry began to dissolve like morning mist, touched by sunlight. In its place grew something warm and bright, the joy of belonging, of being needed, of having friends and purpose. The network of night. What Selene created next was so beautiful that even the stars stopped twinkling for a moment to watch in wonder. She showed the whisper carriers how to weave themselves into a great network that stretched across the entire night sky. Each sprite became like a tiny relay station, catching whispers from the moon and passing them along to their neighbors, who passed them to their neighbors, creating a web of connection that could reach every corner of the earth. Echo became the sprite who specialized in carrying whispers to mountain caves and deep valleys where the moon's direct light couldn't penetrate. Dreamwalker learned to slip whispers through bedroom windows and under doors, ensuring that every sleeping child received their share of peaceful dreams. Hush discovered she had a gift for bringing whispers to hospitals and other places where people needed extra comfort during difficult times. Shimmer became the sprite who carried whispers to other lonely creatures, the shadow sprites' distant cousins who lived in different corners of the world. Soon, sprites everywhere learned that they didn't have to be hungry and forgotten. They could be helpers too, part of the great network of nighttime comfort and connection. As this beautiful network spread across the sky, something wonderful began to happen on Earth below. children begin to dream. In a little house at the edge of a sleepy village, a small girl named Thalia had been tossing and turning in her bed for 3 nights, unable to fall asleep. She clutched her favorite doll, a soft cloth figure with yarn hair, and stared at the ceiling with worried eyes. But tonight, as Selene's renewed moon began to whisper again, and as the whisper carriers started their gentle work, something changed. A whisper, carried by Dreamwalker himself, slipped through Thalia's window like a butterfly made of moonbeam. The whisper curled around the little girl like the softest blanket and began to tell her a story, not in words, but in feelings and images that painted themselves behind her closed eyelids. She saw herself in a magical garden where flowers sang lullabies and friendly dragons told jokes that made her giggle. Her worried frown melted away, replaced by the sweetest smile, and she drifted into the most peaceful sleep she'd had in days. In the house next door, baby Marcus, who had been crying every night without knowing why, suddenly quieted as Echo brought him a whisper full of gentle rocking motions and the memory of being safe and loved. His tiny fists unclenched, and he made the soft, contented sounds that babies make when they dream of warm milk and loving arms. Across the village, in a cottage where old grandmother Lydia lived alone, Hush delivered a whisper that reminded her of all the people who loved her. Even though they lived far away, the whisper showed her that she was connected to every person she had ever cared for, and that love travels on moonbeams, crossing any distance to reach the heart. In the big house on the hill, where young Alexander usually had nightmares about monsters under his bed, Shimmer brought a whisper that transformed all the scary shadows in his room into friendly shapes, shadow puppets that danced on his walls and told him stories of brave heroes and magical adventures where everything always turned out perfectly. And so it went, house by house, heart by heart, across the entire world. Children who had been lying awake with worry found themselves yawning and stretching, ready for sleep. Parents who had been pacing the floors with fussy babies suddenly found their little ones settling peacefully into their cradles. Even the adults who had forgotten how to listen for moon whispers felt a mysterious sense of calm settle over them as they prepared for bed. The flowers remembered their songs, but the magic didn't stop with people. Oh no, dear sleepy one. The moon's whispers had always touched every living thing, and now they were stronger and more far-reaching than ever before. In gardens and meadows all across the earth, flowers that had been silent for 3 nights suddenly remembered their nighttime songs. The roses began to hum soft melodies about love and beauty. The jasmine sang sweet lullabies that made the evening air smell like dreams. The morning glories, even though they were closed for the night, whispered promises about the beautiful sunrise they would bring in the morning. The crickets, who had been chirping lonely, scattered notes, suddenly found their rhythm again. Their music became a symphony, some crickets keeping the beat like tiny drummers, others playing the melody like the world's smallest violinists, all working together to create the perfect background music for peaceful sleep. The wise old owls hooted their approval from every tree, their voices carrying messages of comfort. Hoo-hoo, all is well. Hoo-hoo, sweet dreams await. Hoo-hoo, the moon is watching over you. Even the ocean waves, which had been crashing restlessly against the shore, found their gentle rhythm again. They whispered soft shush, shush, shush sounds that traveled inland on the night breeze, reaching the ears of children who lived far from the sea, but who still found comfort in the ocean's ancient lullaby. The shadow sprites' new home. As the night wore on and the whisper carriers continued their beautiful work, Selene realized something important. These helpful little sprites needed a permanent home, somewhere they could rest between their whisper-carrying duties, somewhere they would never again feel forgotten or alone. Dear ones, she called to them as they finished delivering the evening's whispers. I have a gift for you. Look, she gestured to the moon's surface. And there, where the largest crack had been, a new feature appeared. It looked like a beautiful silver city made of moonbeam and starlight, with tiny houses perfect for sprites, and gardens where they could play, and a central plaza where they could gather to share stories of the whispers they had carried and the dreams they had helped create. This is your home now, Selene said warmly. The city of whispers, right here on the moon's surface. You will always be close to your work, but you will also have a place to rest, to be together, to remember that you are important and loved. The whisper carriers gasped with joy and wonder. They had never had a home before. They had always been drifting, searching, never belonging anywhere. But now they had the most magical home imaginable, right in the heart of the night sky. Whisper spoke for all of them, his voice now strong and clear and full of happiness. Great goddess Selene, you have given us more than names and purpose and home. You have given us the greatest gift of all. You have shown us that everyone, even the smallest and most forgotten, has something precious to offer the world. The promise for tomorrow. As the first hints of dawn began to touch the far edge of the sky, for even the most magical nights must eventually give way to day, Selene prepared to guide her chariot back to its usual path across the heavens. But before she left the moon's surface, she made a promise that would last for all time. From this night forward, she declared, her voice carrying to every corner of the earth and every star in the sky, the moon's whispers will never fail again. The whisper carriers will ensure that no child goes to sleep without peaceful dreams, that no heart feels truly alone in the darkness, and that the magic of connection touches every living thing. She paused and looked at her new friends, the brave little sprites who had been transformed from hungry shadows into helpers of the highest order. And you, dear whisper carriers, will always remember that being small doesn't mean being unimportant. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes in the world. Every whisper you carry, every dream you help create, every moment of peace you bring to a worried heart. These are the most important jobs in the universe. The sprites glowed with pride and purpose. Their shadow forms now shot through with threads of silver light that would mark them forever as friends of the moon and helpers to all who sleep. As Selene stepped back into her chariot, Lampos and Phaethon whinnied softly, their manes flowing like silk in the gentle night breeze. They too were happy that the night's great work was done, and that children everywhere would once again sleep peacefully under their guardian moon. The first morning after. When the sun rose that morning, guided by Selene's brother Helios, in his own magnificent chariot of gold and flame, something beautiful happened all across the world. Children woke up naturally, without alarm clocks or parents having to shake them awake. They woke up smiling, stretching like happy cats, with the memory of wonderful dreams still sparkling in their minds like dewdrops on morning grass. Little Thalia ran to her window and looked up at the sky. Even though the moon was now invisible in the bright daylight, somehow she knew that the moon was still there, still watching over her, still ready to send whispers when nighttime came again. "Baby," Marcus cooed and gurgled happily in his cradle, reaching his tiny hands toward the sunbeam that streamed through his window, as if he were trying to catch a piece of the light to save for bedtime. Grandmother Lydia woke up feeling more rested than she had in months, and she spent the morning baking honey cakes, though she couldn't quite explain why she felt so moved to share sweetness with the world. Young Alexander bounded out of bed and immediately began drawing pictures of the shadow puppet friends he had seen in his dreams, wanting to remember every detail of their magical stories. All across the world, parents marveled at how well their children had slept, how peaceful the night had been, how the very air seemed to hum with contentment and rest. And that night when darkness fell again, and Selene began her eternal journey across the star-filled sky, something beautiful happened. Children everywhere looked up at the moon, some from their bedroom windows, some from their gardens, some while being carried to bed in their parents' arms. And they seemed to know, in the way that children always know the most important truths, that they were safe and loved and connected to something magical and eternal. The moon's whispers flowed freely, carried by the joyful whisper carriers to every corner of the earth. And if you listened very carefully, the way you listen for your mother's footsteps when you're supposed to be asleep, or the way you listen for the ocean when you hold a seashell to your ear, you could hear them too. They whispered about tomorrow's adventures and yesterday's happy memories. They whispered about the love that connects every heart to every other heart, even across great distances. They whispered about the magic that exists in quiet moments, in gentle hands, in lullabies sung softly in the darkness. And most of all, they whispered a promise that would never be broken, that no child who looks up at the moon with wonder will ever truly be alone, because the moon is always listening, always caring, always ready to send whispers of comfort and dreams of joy. Forever and always. And so, dear little dreamer, this is how the moon learned to whisper again, how the shadow sprites became the whisper carriers, and how Selene, the goddess of the gentle night, reminded everyone that love and understanding can heal any hurt, solve any problem, and transform any sadness into something beautiful. Every night since then, and this includes tonight, as you listen to this story, the moon has faithfully whispered to the earth. The whisper carriers continue their gentle work, making sure that peaceful dreams reach every sleeping child, that comfort finds every worried heart, and that the magic of connection touches every corner of the world. When you go to sleep tonight, dear one, listen carefully. You might hear the moon's whisper floating through your window, carried by a helpful sprite who wants nothing more than to bring you the sweetest dreams. You might feel that whisper settle over you like the coziest blanket, reminding you that you are loved, you are safe, and you are connected to all the wonder and magic in the world. And if you look up at the moon before you close your eyes, you might see it glowing just a little brighter, as if it's smiling down at you, grateful for listeners like you who still believe in magic, who still know that the most important things in life are kindness and connection, and the gentle peace that comes when we take care of each other. Sleep well, little dreamer. The moon is whispering your name. The whisper carriers are watching over your dreams, and Selene herself is guiding her silver chariot across the star-filled sky, making sure that your night is filled with nothing but the most beautiful rest and the sweetest dreams that ever were. The end and the beginning of every peaceful night that follows.